Judge President, thank you again for talking to Anchored at Law. Now, judicial activism. Would you consider yourself an activist judge?
I think so.
You do?
Yeah.
Now, you've explained in the last segment the sort of things that you would have done as an activist judge. I'm not sure if it was you, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a judge, I think, who was quoted some years ago as saying he'll get rid of corruption in this country. Wasn't you?
No, it wasn't.
No. Now, if a judge were to say something like that, is that something that is, I don't want to use the word appropriate, but is it something that a judge should concern him or herself with, ridding the country of corruption?
Well, I think in my space, as JP of this division, when I become aware of corrupt trends that have found themselves into the court processes, and when I say corrupt trends, I don't want to be understood to be saying judges becoming corrupt.
Yes.
I'm not saying that.
Yes.
There are things that happen in our space that we're not responsible for, but that lend themselves to corruption. Like the issue of people coming to get fraudulent court orders, right? I've heard stories of people being evicted from their houses based on fraudulent court orders, you know. So those are corrupt trends. So it's my duty, I regard it as my duty to root it out. And where people are identified, that they be taken through the process of the law. If they are arrested, convicted, sentenced.
Let me take this a step further and increase the heat a little bit. Would you say, sitting where you're sitting as a judge president of the busiest court with the most number of judges in the country, that the judiciary, or some judges, maybe, well, let me phrase it this way, that the judiciary is not above susceptibility to corruption?
Well,
in your experience.
In my experience, I've never found a corrupt judge.
No, that's not the question.
Okay.
I'm not asking you whether or not the
susceptibility to corruption.
Yes.
Nah,
we're all
I don't
human
think
beings.
So. Yes, we're all human beings, but the level of judgeship that I've been exposed to lends nothing towards susceptibility to being corrupted.
Well, that's encouraging, but there is 1 or 2 or 3 reported judgments, the latest of which is that of the Constitutional Court. Now, where a judge was accused to have tried to influence judges of the Constitutional Court.
Yes.
Wouldn't say that is an example, or may be seen by some in the country as an example of susceptibility to corruption.
Yeah. Look, as far as I'm aware, there's still an allegation. That matter is still pending. I don't think we have heard the story.
Yeah.
I don't think we have heard from the judge who is accused of having tried to do that. We have not heard from that judge. We don't know what the version is. So that's still out there. It's pending. Hopefully, one day we will hear, because I still maintain I have not come across a judge who would be susceptible to being corrupted in any way.
That's very encouraging. Now, Judge President, you've been Judge President now, what, since 2012?
Since 2010.
Since 2010. Yeah. That's 9 years plus.
Yeah.
What would you say are the most notable, I hesitate to use the word achievement because you're not here to earn brownie points, but your most notable changes, good changes for the better that you have effected in this division?
Yeah. Well, talking about this division, one thing that I looked and saw and frowned upon when I was going for my interview was that judges shouldn't accept that they must just work under unbearable conditions. I think as a JP, I made it my goal that I want to create an enabling environment. And one of those was instead of having one judge sitting in the urgent court, where you have all these complex matters coming to you, you have two judges, all right? I think that's the first thing I did when I came here. Two judges in the urgent court. The other one was to, especially for Johannesburg, to make sure that when they are to be allocated opposed motions, you know, opposed motions, where you get these thick files where there's argument on both sides, you get them in good time, so that even if you're doing other work, but you are preparing so that when you get to hear them, you are on top of them. Because what used to happen is you'd get your opposed motion matters on the Tuesday lunchtime, and you must hear them from Wednesday. Now, judges were being taken through the papers by counsel, though they were ill prepared. So litigants were being shortchanged, I think. You know, so that's the other thing that I've changed. You know, and I mean, I may be criticized, but in this division, Pretoria and Johannesburg, in the last week of term, unless you are sitting in trials, I don't allocate work to judges because they must use that last week to wind up part-head matters that they have or write those remaining judgments, right? Because they also have to do recess duty when you go into recess. So they found that process to be very beneficial, you know. I've also been at the forefront of advancing transformation, and not just gender transformation, also across the color line, you know. I know that as one JP, I have appointed a lot of acting judges of ladies, you know, who would have been ignored, you know. I am activist in the sense that I go out and seek them out. In what field are you an expert? And I bring them here. I'm a tax expert in other areas as well. So I think I've brought in much diversity in the bench, on the bench here. So I look at those things. I think there are other things like being more open to cooperating with the profession, you know, in doing things.
Yes, no, I can attest to that.
Yes.
Because you engaged with us a great deal when I was serving as the chairperson of the GCB.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to move to the Constitutional Court. I read somewhere, I think it's a book by a professor in Cape Town, that some research had been commissioned by government on you as a possible candidate for the position of Chief Justice of South Africa when Justice Sandile Ngcobo's term ended. What happened?
Yes, I think I heard that, yes. I think they asked for my CV, the powers that be, because, you know, the process in this country is for a Chief Justice to be interviewed and appointed. The president makes the nomination, which I don't agree with, by the way, because he can appoint. He can, doesn't say, the Constitution doesn't say he must nominate, it says he must appoint, all right? So I was one of 5 names, you know, but at some stage that interest in me died, but I was chuffed up that, well, someone takes me serious enough to think I can be Chief Justice material, you know.
But did you attend the interview for the Constitutional Court berth as a Chief Justice?
No.
No.
It's what I was explaining earlier.
Yes.
Once the powers that be got the CV and got interested in the current Chief Justice, because that was then Chief Justice Mukwege, all other interests died. And he was a person nominated, and the person interviewed, and he's our Chief Justice. You know.
There was, I remember that occasion, there was some demur from the opposition part, at least the official opposition, that sought to introduce a new candidate from the floor, as it were, at the Judicial Service Commission in Cape Town. Do you recall what happened there?
No,
with that
I didn't follow that process at all. I don't know what happened. As far as I'm aware, it was only Chief Justice Mukwege who was interviewed, and and appointed. And look, I repeat my view. I think we're doing this country disservice by allowing the president to dictate from the beginning. No. I think there should be a normal, open nomination process of people who may be considered. And then it's only the interview that should determine who the president appoints. Because recommendations will go to the president from that list. That's what the Constitution envisages.
Well, there are many not-for-profit organizations in this country. Why wouldn't they have raised that issue? Why do you think they didn't raise that issue in the court?
I don't know. But I know I'm correct because the Constitution says appoint, not nominate.
Okay. Let's pick up on your judicial philosophy in the next segment. Thank you, Judge President.
Okay.